The views expressed in this podcast are solely those of the podcast host and guest and do not necessarily represent those of our distribution partners, supporting business relationships, or supported audience. Welcome to Transacting Value, where we talk about practical applications for instigating self-worth when dealing with each other and even within ourselves, where we foster a podcast listening experience that lets you hear the power of a value system for managing burnout, establishing boundaries, fostering community, and finding identity. My name is Josh Porthouse. I'm your host, and we are redefining sovereignty of character. This is why values still hold value. This is Transacting Value.
First of all, you have it within yourself to heal yourself. Everybody's like, oh, I'm a healer. No, I will never heal you. That is not my job. My job is to create and hold space for you to heal yourself because you have it within you.
Today on Transacting Value, how do you know your own self-worth when maybe you're emotionally unavailable? More importantly, how can you effectively communicate it, gain awareness, and develop it to the betterment of yourself, your family, your friends, and all your other relationships? Today on the show, we're talking with holistic practitioner Nicole Harmony, all about her insights, her advice, and her recommendations on how to do it. I'm Josh Porthouse, I'm your host, and from SDYT Media, this is Transacting Value. Nicole, how you doing?
I am absolutely fabulous today, Josh. Thank you for asking. How are you?
I'm good. And I don't get many people asking me that. I start with a greeting, and then we roll into the intro, and things tend to go the same format every time. But I think you're one of single digits that have been on the show so far that actually asked me in return.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah, no, it's a reciprocation, right?
Right.
It's the way that life is supposed to be.
Well, that's just it, isn't it? That's not the way that it is, though. I think oftentimes, we start to get into this routine or this rhythm, how we want to be perceived or how we tend to act or whatever that pattern of behavior happens to be. And then it just sticks. Even though we're not trying to be rude, it just is. For example, before I get to talking about me being emotionally unavailable, let's talk about how you got into identifying emotional unavailability as a primary focus to get you started. So how about in the next couple minutes, we just set the stage first. Who are you? Where are you from? If you could, I guess, summarize that. And what sort of things are shaping your perspective on the world as it applies to all these things?
So, that's a loaded question as to where I'm from. I originally am from Texas, which is where I currently am recording this. I spent majority of my life in Florida, St. Pete specifically. That is, if I'm going to call home, that is what I call home. But recently I have called home in Asia, Southeast Asia, Thailand specifically. And I plan to go back there in April. So, you know what? When people ask me where home is where my heart is, and home is inside of here. It doesn't have anything to do with where I hang my hat. It's within me. And so I've started to identify with that more as people continue to ask me, where are you from? So that's it in a nutshell for me, for where I'm from. I know that's probably longer than 2 minutes, but to answer your other questions, how I came upon the emotional unavailability, that's definitely a deep question. My dad was emotionally unavailable to me, and I didn't have recognition of this until probably my late 30s, early 40s, and I'm 51 years old. So it was very much late in life that
You're 51?
Yeah, I'm 51.
Oh, good genes, I guess. Good for you.
Thank you.
Oh.
Getting rid of the emotional baggage helps to reverse the aging. Getting rid of the junk that you're holding on to helps to reverse the aging. When I look at a before and after picture of me back when I was still very much in the dark about what had happened to me as a child and the abuse that I have experienced within relationships, both professional and, sorry, my car accident concussion sometimes gives me a little bit of brain freeze, but romantic, romantic, intimate, and professional relationships. You can experience emotional abuse, through all of them. And it wasn't until probably 2012 is when I started, no, 2010 was when I really started to dive deep into the emotions. And when I look back at pictures of myself between before 2010 and even actually after that, you can see the age reversal that I have experienced in the last few years when I really started doing the deep dive, the work with the psychedelics, the ayahuasca, the psilocybin, and then also doing the emotional healing on myself through the support of others, through mentors, and just, me, myself, and I as well. And then finding the work that I actually facilitate as practitioners, as holistic practitioners, people who create and hold space for others. When we hold space for somebody else to heal, we inevitably heal a portion of ourselves as well. And so when we are creating that space, we're healing those parts of us too. So the healing happens every single day. So yeah, reversing of the age is kind of inevitable when you start doing the deep work on yourself. But anyway, I just sidetracked a little bit, but my dad was emotionally unavailable. I didn't realize it until I started reading books on just different daughter wounds, with the father wounds. And I recognized all of these points of references that these authors were making. And I was like, wow, that's me. And so I reached out to my sisters, and my sisters have kind of a different point of view and perspective on my dad's only flesh and blood. My two sisters were adopted by him, and so they look at him as their savior. But I had to kind of take a really hard look and be like, yeah, he's an amazing person. He's an amazing provider. He just doesn't know how to be emotionally available for the women in his life. I have two sisters. My mom, we didn't have any brothers. There were no other men in the family. And he just didn't know how to because he wasn't taught how to. And his grandfather wasn't taught how to. And so it was a generational trauma and curse that kind of trickled down to me. And then I became the breaker of the chain, right? Which there's a lot of us in this lifetime right now. And so I started doing a lot of work. It was dark a lot of the time. And there was every single relationship that I've had with a man was a reflection back to the relationship with my father, and in good and in bad ways. And so I really had to start, kind of taking a look, and thank God my dad is still with us. And at that time, he did still have his faculties. He has since become, extremely mild cognitive impairment within the brain. And so I was able to have a couple of really good years of having, deep introspective conversations. And I actually received the validation and the apology that younger version of me was really needing in order to push past it. And now we have cultivated this beautiful relationship, and I'm able to be honest with him and say openly, how I felt as a child. And again, receive that validation, being able to feel seen and heard was monumental for those younger versions to be integrated back into my soul. So, yeah. Did I answer your question? I'm not sure.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things I think that everybody brings in as they grow through life unwittingly.
Mm-hmm.
So, like in your case, what was it then that triggered you? Instead of looking in, I got to look back, or instead of looking forward, I got to reflect. What was the trigger?
The failed relationships. I was the common denominator.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
When you go into your relationships and you give it all you got and it still fails, you have to start taking a hard look at yourself and what you're bringing in. What traumas and distortions are you bringing into the relationships? What challenges are being shown to you? That's, the the Latin have this beautiful explanation and definition of what a relationship is, and it's where the soul goes to heal. People feel like they get into a relationship and it's going to be all rainbows and unicorns, but your intimate relationship is going to push you and reflect back to you and show the dark spots that need to have the light shown on in order for it to heal. And if you do not have the framework and the skill set in order to move past and shift through it and the support, then the relationship is going to fail because the younger version is going to want to sabotage and it's going to want to run because it doesn't want to face those shadows.
Alrighty, folks, sit tight and we'll be right back on Transacting Value.
Pass it on. Here's my bucket list for the day. Read an article on a news subject. Say only nice things about others. And listen to everyone's opinions. Because making things better requires change. Now, these changes aren't going to show up on your news feed, but they're things I can do. So change something today. It's not going to change the entire world, but it's going to change your world. Change is in you. Pass it on. From passiton.com.
The younger version is going to want to sabotage and it's going to want to run because it doesn't want to face those shadows.
Okay. All right. So that makes a lot more sense now. See, because I saw a little bit about you before we got to record, and I kept seeing inner child, inner child, inner child. And to me, that meant more whimsical or more sensitive or maybe less resilient or less flexible, right? But now, basing some degree of behavior off of that kind of cognition, I think changes everything.
Yeah.
Because, yeah, I guess it is sort of a self-sabotage. But then how do you identify some sort of a group or some sort of a family system in any kind of relationship where you start to feel comfortable without accepting how things were? Because then you have to reinvent, right?
I'm going to need a little bit more clarity. I'm not following, and that could be my concussion.
No. So what I mean is, if you have to let go of whatever was, then you have to reinvent to a new version. Your thought process, your behaviors, your relationship conversations, biases, whatever. So how do you find a new comfort system then? Because you're starting over, but as an adult now.
Right. Absolutely. You just, I want to say you kind of just have to throw spaghetti at a wall and just see, you have to really kind of check in with your body and see what is dysregulating your nervous system, the emotions. Do you have the skill set in order to regulate your emotions? So I grew up in a household where my mom was extremely affectionate, but my dad was emotionally unavailable. So I have since seeked out women that are very loving and huggy and cuddly, but the men have been emotionally unavailable to me because that's where my nervous system felt normal, felt comfortable. Because the ages of 0 and 8 years old, your beliefs are created. Your belief systems are created. And if your baseline is emotional, unavailable men are safe to you, then when you go out into the world as an adult and you start to date and a man is overly supportive, then that's not going to necessarily bring you peace because it's going to dysregulate the nervous system. The baseline, again, it feels safe when they are not available to you. So you're going to create scenarios to make them emotionally unavailable. That creates the friction in the relationship because the man may want to be available to you, but you're trying to change that. You're trying to change him into something that was your baseline, was your safety. And until you actually have recognition of this and you have shifted and integrated these parts, that's part of the work that I do. You integrate these parts so they're not out there sabotaging. They're not out there trying to make the decision and create the scenarios to get you back to your baseline of having emotionally unavailable men in your life. Does that resonate?
Well, a little. So when it comes to, for example, emotionally unavailable men and generational traumas, that's sort of my MO. So everybody that I've talked to, at least that I remember talking with throughout my entire life, has said, "Why are you so distant? Why are you so cold? What is it,
Mm,
about pick a relationship that just turns you off about it? Why can't you be more affectionate?" These types of comments.
mhm.
But I feel normal. I don't
Yeah,
feel like I'm ostracizing people or intentionally distancing anybody, or, I'm engaging
yeah,
to the extent I feel appropriate. I'm just not emotionally engaged. I'd say 90% of the time. But until this conversation, I don't think I ever attributed any of that sort of, I guess, loosely behavior to anything generational. But as soon as you brought it up, it was.
mm,
Absolutely.
yeah. God, all the hair on my body just stood up when you said that.
Yeah.
That's beautiful that you were able to make that awareness and recognition.
Well, I mean, that's only half of the equation, isn't it? I mean, what do you do with that kind of insight? What do you do with that kind of insight?
If you were a client and I would start asking a series of questions, when was it, who was it that was emotionally unavailable to you? And then, again, with the dialogue, figuring out when that first time that you felt like you didn't have the affection from that primary caregiver that you wanted to receive, what need went unmet, at what age. And then we start to practice the memory integration technique, which is a series of questions, a sensory exercise, you meeting that younger version of yourself, going in and champion as the adult, breaking the contract of keeping you safe, because that's essentially what he is doing right now, is he's keeping you safe from emotional connection, because he's not used to that, right? Because he experienced non-emotional connection, emotional unavailability. That's where he feels safe, like you said. This is all that I can give because this is all that I was taught.
Mm,
The expansion isn't there.
mm. Okay. Does this always have to happen with this process, with a coach, with a witting second party? Or can some of these awarenesses and developments happen by chance?
I mean, I can't speak in absolutes. With me, I definitely had to have support of an emotional healer. Like, that's kind of how I found this work in the first place, was in 2010. I worked with an emotional healer. She uncovered a memory that I had suppressed. I didn't even know was there. And it wasn't sexual abuse or anything like that, but I carried that belief of I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not safe for 30 years or something like that. It was when I was 8 years old. So I uncovered it when I was 35, 27 years later. And it
Mm,
was stapled to every single relationship, every connection, every life decision that I made for the next 27 years. So for me personally, I feel like when it is the darkest of the spots, that it's almost like a blind spot. And sometimes we can't see it without somebody else, a skilled professional, to help you see that and have the skill set. Now, as I am right now, I have the skill set and I have the support out there, but I also have the skill set myself that I can do, emotional releases and things like that on my own. But I would say that the average person walking around on the street without some sort of deep work or introspective experience cannot
mm,
process something like that. It's not just going to dissolve on its own because it's deeply rooted. It's almost like a weed that has grown such huge roots. A rainstorm is not going to come and wipe it away, wash it away. Does that resonate?
yeah. Yeah. Do you think maybe it's cultural and not just generational?
Oh,
I mean,
definitely.
that,
And
that
it's
type
gotten
of behavior,
worse. Yeah.
yeah, because it
Yeah.
gets reinforced and repeated.
Hmm.
I mean, inculcated, I think is a better word.
Yeah, absolutely. My dad, he is a pastor's son. His dad, or I think it was his grandfather, was part of the church as well. And so but he wasn't. My dad wasn't. Um, but he just wasn't, he gave to his church and not to his family. And even when I had the conversation with my dad, he still defends my grandfather. And I have to tell him it was not okay for you to not feel, for you not to have a voice. I mean, I've had to do a little bit of work with my dad, just helping him integrate, parts, those younger parts of himself, just to kind of give him a better life, because the anxiety and the depression can be overwhelming, when these parts are just out walking around. And to answer your question, to go back to, it's not just generational, it's definitely a cultural thing. And if you look at different cultures outside of like the westernized cultures, I mean, it can be even worse, and the ones where they are, the little boys are brought up to be men right away, and they're not even allowed to have a childhood. I would be interested to see these different cultures and how they are reacting and what level of anxiety and depression that they're experiencing, because they're still humans, even though they haven't been in the westernized culture. They're still humans. Has anybody asked them, what they were experiencing, not being able to have a childhood and having to start working in the rice fields at the age of 8 years old?
Alrighty, folks, sit tight and we'll be right back on Transacting Value. Join us for Transacting Value, where we discuss practical applications of personal values every Monday at 9 a.m. on our website, transactingvaluepodcast.com, Wednesdays at 5 p.m. and Sundays at noon on wreathsacrossamerica.org/radio.
Has anybody asked them, what they were experiencing, not being able to have a childhood and having to start working in the rice fields at the age of 8 years old?
Okay. Well, let me try a different perspective then. So by rice fields, I assume you mean more Eastern Hemisphere type cultures, or rooted in sort of agrarian type cultures that
right.
0 to 8 years old, you just have to work because you got to survive. Right. So it is what it is. But so a childhood in that regard, maybe just qualifies differently when the bias or the baseline is a westernized sort of more, traditionally playful childhood, where you have the luxury to be able to not worry about survival as often or at all.
Yeah.
But how do you think that stacks up to, if we use a baseline, and I'm not a psychiatrist, I'm not even a neurosurgeon, but how do you think that stacks up against the sort of prevailing standard that if your frontal lobe isn't really even fully developed until your mid-20s, that the majority of individuals that join first responder occupations in the Western Hemisphere, service members in the Department of Defense in the Western Hemisphere, albeit 17, 18 years old, are still learning how to embrace the world, find their place, emotionally respond to triggers, but conditioned to respond from a distanced, more ostracized position. Is it going to be the same result?
Are you talking about the two different cultures being within the military? I'm
talking about two different age groups. Two different age groups. So you're saying 0 to 8, not having a childhood, but theoretically 17, 18 years old is still young enough to not need to care in a Western Hemisphere. So in a parallel concept, right? Is there still the same degree of emotional detachment or unavailability then from adults that are experiencing this at 17 to 18 compared to adults that are experiencing it 0 to 8?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the 0 to 8 years old, that's the baseline that the psychiatry, whatever, neuroscience, groupings, whatever the division of created. So again, I don't like to speak in absolutes, but if you have the Eastern Hemisphere, the 0 to 8 years old, and you don't have the childhood, and then you go into the military and the frontal lobe hasn't been developed quite yet. Yeah. I mean, it's about the distortions and the traumas at that point. So just going towards the military, let's just break that down for just a second. Again, the concussion is a little bit throwing me for a loop right now. But when you are 17 to 18 years old, I actually have a client that experienced severe trauma in the first years of the military as a man. And the distortions that he experienced in the military were very similar to things that he experienced in his childhood. And so I was able to help him connect the dots. When we have that baseline of 0 to 8 years old, the brain will inevitably try to recreate scenarios to go back to that baseline. And that could be abuse. And so it's going to seek out scenarios, if you believe in this type of thing, where we co-create our reality, right? And thoughts become things. And so if you are in a position, and I know a lot of people are not going to agree with this, but if you are in a position where you're experiencing sexual or physical abuse, then I would bet the house, bet the farm on it that you may have experienced sexual or physical abuse in your childhood.
Okay. Well, gaining exposure, gaining experiences, and just growing up, I think helps, right? Because then you start to learn other ways to perceive different events and other applications of whatever you just perceived, right? So, what role do you think travel has on healing any of that or increasing a self-awareness around any of those traumas?
That's a beautiful question, because the travel for me has really healed a lot of my soul. Just being able to zoom out from the Western culture for me personally has been monumental. Especially being over there during the election, this past election, and being able to witness what was going on within society, that when you're here, you're so indoctrinated and ingrained into it. But when you can zoom out and heal those parts of, again, the indoctrination that we are experiencing in the healthcare system, for example, being over there and being able to receive healthcare that would have possibly put you into bankruptcy in the United States. It's just a part of healing yourself, being able to know that you don't have to follow every single other person. You have it within yourself to make your own decisions. You have it within yourself. Well, first of all, you have it within yourself to heal yourself. Everybody's like, oh, I'm a healer. No, I will never heal you. That is not my job. My job is to create and hold space for you to heal yourself, because you have it within you. I did 5 ayahuasca ceremonies. On my last ceremony last year, I told myself, I do not need to do this anymore because I have it within me. The medicine is within me. And I know that kind of gets off the track of your question, but being able to travel and rediscover myself without the pitfalls and I just feel like, as I'm sitting here trying to think, just the noise, the heaviness that we experience in the westernized culture, needing to be better than the next person, always having to be a human doing, not a human being. And that is something that I learned how to do whenever I left the United States and was able to be. When I was in Thailand, I remember it was my last time to be in the water because I got a cut on my foot, and you can't go into the water when you have a cut on your foot because of the flesh-eating bacteria. So I was laying in the water, and the salinity levels were so high in this water that you don't even have to try to float. You just float effortlessly. And I was looking up at the beautiful blue sky against these green jungle covered mountains with palm trees. And I was just like, I don't have to do anything other than just float here in the water. And I'm okay. And I'm not doing anything wrong by being here. But in the US, or even Canada, the UK, these other westernized cultures, you would be looked at as lazy. You would be looked at as unmotivated. But over there, it's different.
Is that why you chose to go over there?
Yeah.
Just for 180 degrees different exposure?
Yeah. Yep. Because I did it for 6 months in Mexico. And so that was kind of my real breakaway, not backpacking. I did that in Europe, but breakaway right after COVID and just live someplace else in another culture. And I was in kind of Mexico light, so I don't even really count that. But I had this block of time, and I'd always been fascinated with the Asian culture and just the beauty of Asia, Southeast Asia specifically. Bali, was everybody's like, I want to go to Bali, the secret of Bali, the love of Bali, the whole yoga and meditation. And I got over there and I was like, I do not see it. I see tourism. I see charlatans that are parading around as influencers that are trying to quote unquote heal people. And it was a huge turnoff. And so I went to Thailand and I found what I needed in Thailand. And that's the reason I'm going back. I've been back here for 10 days, 11 days now. And I'm like already booking my ticket back because I just can't. Especially after being in this car accident, I see how broken the medical system is and how much red tape we have had to go through, even though we have an attorney working for us. Just the red tape that we have to go through in order to get any kind of treatment. I'm like, what is going on? We were injured 4 days ago. Like, why are we having to walk around in pain just so you guys can get your ducks in a row and the red tape cleared? Like, it's just crazy. And there you can go to a state-of-the-art hospital, receive treatment right then and there. And it is a fraction of a cost over here. And then again, the simple life over there, the cost of living. The doctors over there are not elite. They're just doctors. They have just studied the medical system, but they're not the elite of the country. They don't live in the $1 million mansions and drive the fancy cars and go on the fancy trips. That's the westernized culture over here.
Alrighty, folks, sit tight and we'll be right back on Transacting Value.
This message is from the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs. VA disability compensation is open to veterans with a disability rating of 10% or more. Veterans may qualify for more than $4,000 a month. Those with a disability rating of 10% or more also get free or low-cost VA health care. If you have a disability rating, you can apply for a rating increase. Learn more at va.gov/disability.
The doctors over there are not elite. They're just doctors. They have just studied the medical system, but they're not the elite of the country. They don't live in the $1 million mansions and drive the fancy cars and go on the fancy trips. That's the westernized culture over here. It's just crazy. It's very backwards. So, yeah.
Well, so we don't necessarily have any doctors when it comes to holistic healthcare, right? Obviously, there's plenty of people that are like licensed MDs and RNs and have all these certification things. But to say holistic healthcare, I think implies a certain degree of integrity in the foundation where it's wholesome, not specialized in most. So how do you view that? Maybe detriment. How do you view that qualifier here in westernized culture, where if you apply it to, like I said earlier, service members, first responders, or any type of psychographic here, if we can't find that kind of care because it's not covered by insurance or because it's not something that exists wherever we're at, what then are some options to work through those kinds of things?
I mean, we do have the integrative healthcare. Obviously, you're going to have to pay out of pocket. I mean, I haven't gone to a Western doctor. This is the first time that I've had to go to one with the accident in years. You have to pay out of pocket. The insurance game that was the other thing that I had a problem with the other day, is that the insurance game keeps you bounded to the healthcare system, right? The revenue that they have created, the revenue stream that they have created. They are putting you into a place of fear, making you think that you need all of this coverage. When if you do everything right with your body, you eat healthy, you exercise, you process your emotions, you meditate daily, then you're going to be healthy. You don't necessarily, everybody's like, oh no, you have heart disease and that's hereditary. Well, guess what? My dad had a quadruple bypass surgery 5 years ago. I went in for the heart scan or the calcium score scan a month after his surgery, 2 months after his surgery, he had 0. So don't tell me that it's hereditary. Everything is reversible. The genetics loads the gun, but the lifestyle pulls the trigger. So to answer your question is to figure it out and don't allow a system that is there to put you, that is put into place to put you into fear and to keep you sick, to keep you down. Figure it out on your own. Start to pull back the curtain on the wizard. Start to see beyond the veil. Start to think for yourself instead of following what everybody else is doing. That's probably going to get me killed.
Well, red pill, blue pill, So, okay, there's, I think something interesting when you talked about co-creating a reality, which is essentially what you were just describing, like taking ownership and accountability over your lifestyle. That I think is maybe underrated, or at least understated. That degree of ownership, and when it comes to aspects of masculinity throughout Westernized culture, or even femininity, I mean, it's really the same. Where each has their own sort of strongholds over what you do and don't discuss in public. That I think it becomes sort of our responsibility, right? People like us, for example, that are willing to have these kinds of conversations and broadcast them to the public, for example, or putting it into a book or putting it into a practice and helping other people come to some sort of closure and direction. I think that's just the responsibility that you've adopted and volunteered to take on. But I think some of those things can be taught in the beginning. I mean, you mentioned everything's reversible, which then I think also implies everything could start differently as well.
Yeah.
It does not need to be reversed, right? So this is a segment of the show called Developing Character.
Developing Character.
And now it's 2 questions, but here's why. I think of all the things that any individual person has in common, in the past, growing up, in the future, who they become, at present, who they are, really the only thing is their character, because you can't control all the other variables that might impact it. So I think the qualities that describe and ground our character, those values, are, if we can start to identify what they are, what they were, what they're becoming, it's a lot easier to have a starting point, a common reference point, maybe, to grow from. So my 2 questions are about your value system. 1, when you were growing up, what were some of the values that you were exposed to or that you remember learning as a child? My second question is then now, what are some of your values, if they've changed?
Religion was very strong in my household, especially my dad coming from his religious background as a pastor's son. So, we went to Sunday school and we went to church on Sunday. That was a value that was instilled greatly into us as children. Now, when I started to become a teenager, I was working all the time. I was working in retail, so I slowly became disconnected from the church, and then I became fully disconnected from it whenever I got into my teens and early 20s. I moved to New York. I tried to go to church there, but it wasn't until probably my 30s that I started seeing religion for what it was. And now I really see religion for what it is. And I don't agree with it any longer. I don't identify with the division that has been created within the religious sectors. So that's one value that has dramatically shifted. The other values are, just, and these are also kind of trauma responses where, don't make too much noise, be a good little girl. Well, that is suppressing what may or may not be comfortable for that little girl. I do know that there were some men in my parents' circle that sometimes spoke inappropriate as I look back, but I was always told to be a good little girl. And I was also somewhat gaslighted sometimes. Oh no, you're crazy. They're not thinking that. And I'm like, guess what? Now I know, I'm like, and I definitely speak my voice now, use my voice now, but you don't get to tell somebody how they feel because that's how they feel. So you don't get to say that they don't. All you get to say is, I'm sorry if I made you feel that way. That was not my intention. Or if I did make you feel that way, I did not mean to. How can I make it better? Not, I didn't make you feel that way. You're crazy. That's like gaslighting 101.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another value. Always be kind to others. Again, another trauma response. Yes, we should be kind to others, but we should also have boundaries set in place for us.
Oh, I see.
Because if we're people pleasing all the time, right, then we're pouring from an empty cup, and we need to still nourish ourselves. So it's interesting how the values that I was given at face value, they look like every other value that's given to, the American family, right? But if you take a step back, you see that if context is not included into the value, how they can be interpreted as being suppressing, and again, having, that trauma attached to it. I don't know if that answers your questions or not.
Well, yeah. And you also brought up an interesting point too, where you mentioned about being kind and then compared it essentially to lacking boundaries, because there's got to be everything sort of in moderation that I guess I hadn't considered before, because I sort of always considered kindness with, I don't know, maybe just helping other people or some degree of empathy or sympathy, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I never attributed it with boundaries, taking care of yourself first. And so then I guess, really for the sake of time, I only have maybe 3 other questions. And this next one is based on that fact, being kind and boundaries. Occupationally, again, since we've been talking about it, let's stick with, say, first responders and service members as an industry. Occupationally, being kind actually directly means self-sacrifice, because that's your industry. That's the whole point of the duty and service you're providing, right?
Right.
But so what about the boundaries then that you can't control, because you have to fill your mission set, you have to fill your occupation, you have to provide a service. And so you don't have the luxury oftentimes to say, you know what, I need to stop for lunch. I can't take that next patient. Or I need to go to the bathroom. I can't go check on that patient right now. What then? How do we harmonize necessarily lacking boundaries and still maintaining being kind as a value system, if that's something we hold pretty close?
And that's interesting that you say that, there's so many nurses that suffer from chronic kidney infections because they haven't been able to urinate. They haven't been able to pee for hours. And that's not a boundary system. That's a broken healthcare system, because you should not have so many patients on your workload that in so little support that you cannot go pee. That is the craziest thing I've ever heard in my life. Out of all of the people that are involved in healthcare and the amount of billions of dollars, trillions of dollars of revenue that it generates, and you can't hire an extra nurse or somebody that is able to allow you the relief so you can sit down and have a meal, and you can sit down and go to the bathroom without having to worry about it. First of all, the energy exchange comes into play. If you have a nurse that is burned out, can't pee, has a chronic kidney infection, goes in and serves her patient, what kind of energy is she going to be giving off to that patient? Probably not positive energy, right? Because she's got a bunch of gunk inside of her. It's just like with the surgeons that stand up for 18 hours or whatever it is, and they don't have, and then they make mistakes. We should not be sacrificing the patient's well-being and the energy that they're trying to gather to heal their bodies by putting the so-called experts and professionals in there that they're not even able to be healed, whole people themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's a broken system, if anything. So it's not a boundaries issue. Now, yeah, the boundaries do come in, but are you able to say, no, I can't, for fear that you lose your job? I mean, so again, you can set the boundaries, but the system's broken. So until we repair the system, then it doesn't matter how many boundaries you have. And that's why a lot of people quit. That's why a lot of people left the healthcare system during COVID, because of what had occurred. I mean, everybody says it was because they didn't want to be vaxxed. No, they were burned out and they couldn't even think for themselves. And they didn't have any time for themselves anymore. That's when they set the boundary.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the toll that it takes on their families, or second, third order sort of ripples as an effect of that. So,
exactly.
I mean, at the risk of stating the obvious here, I got to ask, all of these experiences that you've had, these ceremonies, your travels at this point, all different directions around the world, and then the experiences of working with different clients, and then just your own life. What has all of this actually done to instigate your own self-worth now, in hindsight, compared to who you were decades ago?
Oh my gosh. I have never been so much in love with myself. I'm so proud of what I have been able to accomplish in the past 10 years. To look at myself in the mirror is a completely different experience than it was 5 years ago. I can look at myself in the mirror and be proud of the reflection that's looking back at me. I don't know if a lot of people can say that truthfully, like really looking at yourself in the mirror, looking at your eyes and the soul that you have become and evolved to. And that's the evolution that I've experienced. And one reason why I continue to travel, because each leg that I travel gives that experience back to my clients. And even though, yeah, I do love myself, I love my clients. I love what I do. I hope I never have to not do it. Like I'm not working towards being able to have my business run automatically, be automated. I don't ever want to do that. I always want to be on the receiving end of being able to serve my clients.
Well, that alone's powerful. So congratulations, because I agree with you. I don't think it's very common, unfortunately. So the fact that you're able to find some, well, on one hand, contentment, and on the other hand, degree of success in it that you can sustain it, I think says a lot. So yeah, absolutely. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Of course. My last question then, of all the things that you have done, if anybody wants to become a client or wants to follow along with your journey or any future blogs or merchandise or books or whatever your travels become in the future, where do people go?
NicoleHarmony.com. That has every single thing on there. I'm sure the link will be in the show notes, but it's NicoleHarmony.com. There's a couple of freebies that you can download. You can book one-off sessions if you so desire. You can book a free session with me to see how I may support you and give you the different offerings that I have at that moment. I do Akashic Records readings as well. This is something that I just introduced that's new within the last 6 months, I believe, into my practice. And the memory integration technique is about to blow up into a global type of way. I have been kind of holding it close to me for the last 2 years, just making sure that the results that I was seeing were going to be sustainable and repetitive, and they have been. Each time that I allow that space, create and allow that space for my client to heal, specifically with the memory integration technique, it's 100% effective. And I've never seen anything like it. I've curated it over different things that I've learned and things that have just been downloaded to me via source, if you believe in that kind of thing. And but it's time for other practitioners to learn the technique so I can bring it global. That way more and more people can heal. So a course is in the process right now.
That'd be cool. All right. Well, so first off, Nicole, you're exactly right. To anybody who's new to the show, if you click see more or show more, depending on the player you're streaming this conversation on, in the drop-down description for this conversation, you will see links to NicoleHarmony.com, and you'll be able to find some information there, which is a pretty sweet opportunity from the sounds of it, because everybody's then getting in on the ground floor before this explodes. So that's pretty exciting. Also, Nicole, just for your own edification, if you're interested, we have a lady who, at the time of this recording, hasn't aired yet, but we've already spoken, and she'll be on next season with this conversation as well. Her name is Janelle Klassen. She wrote a book called Nursing the Nurse, and that's exactly what she talks about. She's out in Australia. We've also had a guy come on the show. His name's Novin JC. He's actually splits his time between Indonesia and LA. And his entire focus is flow state and what it's done for him in movie production and the entertainment industry here in the States. And then what it's done for him in his own sort of private and personal life in Indonesia. And I think there's a lot of interesting overlap that you've just described that you may find some resonance there as well.
Yeah, I can't wait to listen to those episodes. I actually spent 17 years in the film industry, so I'll be curious to listen to his. Yeah. That's actually what got me sick, was the film industry.
Oh, so the workload, burnout?
The workload, just not ever being right in your job. Like you were never right. Everything was always wrong. It was never a good job. Something was always needed. And then talk about not being able to sit down and eat or go to the bathroom. Yeah, 16 to 18 hour days of having to shovel food into your mouth for like 15 minutes and run. I was in wardrobe, and then I would have to run and go get the talent dressed so the crew that was getting done could go back to set and everything was ready to go. Yeah, it was always about the budget, the almighty dollar. Overtime. Yeah, it was a lot.
Here in the future, come back and we'll talk about how it applies to the entertainment industry. I think that could be its own separate conversation entirely. So that'd be pretty sweet. But for right now, since we are out of time, I appreciate you making it and coming on and just talking for a little while, especially right now around dinner time. So first of all, thanks for your time, your insight, your vulnerability, and your ability to explain it too. I think helps, because then it's not super spiritual and out of reach. It's still grounded enough to make sense and have a practical application. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Josh. This has been an honor. I really appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for saying that. And to everybody else who's been watching this conversation or follow along with any of our other conversations, thank you guys for coming back and tuning into the show. If you want to hear more of our conversations, head to our website, transactingvaluepodcast.com. Here's the cool thing on the homepage. In addition to finding links to all of our other conversations in the episodes tab, there's a button on the top right corner that says leave a voicemail. Click on it. You get 2 minutes of talk time all to yourself. Here's my recommendation for what you can do with it. 1, let us know what you think of the show. Let us know what you think about the questions, my hosting style, the guests, the topics, the flow of the show, the flow of the conversation, anything and all the above. That'd be great, and I'd appreciate it. I know my team would as well. But secondly, tell Nicole what you think about this conversation. Tell Nicole what you think about her practice, what you think about her background, what you think about what she's doing with it. Give her some resources, give her some love. Let her know things that maybe she's unaware of that she can incorporate, just like she was talking about her memory technique, helping other people in the future as well. And then we'll forward that audio file on to Nicole or get you guys in touch if that's what you want as well. I really, really Genuinely appreciate having some time to talk to you about this conversation. And again, I think it's pretty underrated. So I'd love to have you come back and do something similar again.
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you.
Absolutely. But for right now, till next time, that was Transacting Value.
Thank you to our show partners. And folks, thank you for tuning in and appreciating our value as we all grow through life together. To check out our other conversations, or even to contribute through feedback, follows, time, money, or talent, and to let us know what you think of the show, please leave a review on our website, transactingvaluepodcast.com. We also stream new episodes every Monday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time through all of your favorite podcasting platforms like Spotify, iHeart, and TuneIn. You can now hear Transacting Value on Reads Across America Radio Eastern Standard Time, Wednesdays at 5 p.m., Sundays at noon, and Thursdays at 1 a.m. Head to readsacrossamerica.org/transactingvalue to sponsor a wreath and remember, honor, and teach the value of freedom for future generations. On behalf of our team and our global ambassadors, as you all strive to establish clarity and purpose, ensure social tranquility, and secure the blessings of liberty or individual sovereignty of character for yourselves and your posterity, we will continue instigating self-worth, and we'll meet you there. Until next time, that was Transacting Value.